Our next storyteller is Karen Went. And anybody that knows Karen can appreciate her energetic and her positive approach to storytelling. I have to say that I have never seen Karen have anything get in the way, any obstacle or any challenge ever get into her way. She is a formidable force, I'm telling you, when it comes to storytelling, one of the best. I really enjoy her stories a lot, and I know you will too. Now, Karen, she specializes in interactive tales and fun stories that have to do with nature and the outside. And she mentioned that adults especially enjoy her heartfelt, homegrown true tales of her life in Wisconsin and stories from her out and about travels with her husband. And I know many of us were so happy with her stories that got us through that pandemic. I'm telling you, listening to her stories while she was kayaking, and oh my goodness, just awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, when asked about her special moment, Karen talked about a time when she was relatively new in storytelling, working as a youth services coordinator, and she said that there was a visit to the library, and there were a group of students that came along, and she was into the story, and then all of a sudden she got to a point in the story where she kind of lost her place and didn't know what her next part was. But she says she had a very special person in the audience, and it was her sister-in-law, Pam. It's always good to have somebody in the audience, right? They can kind of gesture to you. So she said that Pam was loudly whispering, helping her out, right? It was the chicken! The chicken! Chicken! And Karen says, this confused her even more because there was no chicken in the story. It was a rooster, she said. But Karen said it was a pivotal moment for her to learn to relax and pause and not to worry too much and to get some coaching on her story. So now it's our time, it's our turn to pause and relax as Columbus, Wisconsin's very own tells us a personal story, Under the Same Sky. Karen?
Mama stood with a clothes peg in one hand and her bloomers in the other at the laundry line, looking up at the sky. Papa was nearby with an axe, felling a dead tree to make firewood for the family. 14-year-old Stanley was stacking that firewood, but close by on a stump was his school writing slate and a piece of chalk. And on the slate was a diagram that he had drawn based on an article that he read and found on page 244 of the April 21st, 1900 Scientific American. Out in the yard was Sister, laying in that green clover, looking up at an azure blue sky and naming out the cloud formations as they went by. Mama, look at the horse jumping over the pig. Brother, Papa, come and see the dog dancing with the duck. And that family, they waited there all together under that sky for the change that they had read about happening. Stanley told them that hundreds of scientists from around the country would be pouring into the town nearby, Wadesboro, North Carolina, for the May 28th, 1900 total solar eclipse. And so they were there under that sky, waiting and watching. And as they looked around, they saw things changing. Where there had been no wind earlier in the day, there was now a breeze fluttering the laundry that was on the line and cooling down their face from that warm day. And the color was changing. Stanley looked around and he saw a 360-degree sunset. And the frogs in the pond were beginning to chirp and peep, and the birds, they weren't singing so loudly anymore. And the cat, who usually rubs up against Mama's leg, was standing there looking around the same as they were, looking up at the sky. The cat was confused, but Stanley wasn't confused. He knew what was coming. And so they all stood there together, waiting for that darkness to descend. A solar eclipse has brought trembling of excitement and curiosity, fear and wonder to people for millenniums. One article that I read brought out that the Navajo believed that this was a time for quiet and meditation. Another article said that the Ojibwa of the Great Lakes tribes, well, they believed that this was an extinguishing of the sun, and so they took fire to their arrows and they shot those flaming arrows up to the darkened sun to try and rekindle it. Ancient Chinese would bang, can you do that part with me? They would bang on their drums and their pots and their pans, and they would make loud noise trying to chase away the celestial dragon that was eating the sun. Eskimos believed that the sun and moon were temporarily diseased, and so they would cover themselves up so they wouldn't catch it. I did not know what to expect for my first total solar eclipse, but I was so excited when my fiance and his best friend, my fiance Brad and his best friend Dave, who worked at the planetarium at UW La Crosse, they invited me to go on a bus trip to Manitoba, Canada. I was so happy. This was going to be a fun trip. When we got there and I got off the bus, hundreds of people were lined up. Some had tools, others had toys. Some had binoculars with filter on the lenses, and some had cameras with lenses as long as my arm. Others had giant telescopes. People were excited and chattering and talking to each other, and a girl near me turned and she showed me a piece of cardboard with a bunch of holes poked into it. I was a little confused. I didn't know what this was for until she showed me by holding the cardboard up, you know, Paul, holding that cardboard up so that the rays of the sun shone through all those little holes, and the reflection of the moon eclipsing the sun spelled out her name on her t-shirt on the ground there. We all were watching and waiting and chattering and talking, and the excitement was real, and things were changing. The air changed, the breeze changed. I didn't notice the cold so much because it was February. But someone yelled, "Put on your solar glasses!" And so I did. I put them on and I looked up into the sky to see what they all were seeing. And I saw a black disc, the black disc of the moon, crossing across a yellowish, golden, turmeric-colored, pulsating orb in the sky. Oh, that was the sun. And the moon was moving across the sun and moving across the sun until there was just a sharp-edged sliver of orange around the outer edge of the moon. And someone said, "Take off your glasses!" And so I did. I took them off. And sparkling out, shining bright, sharp, white, shining rays of a diamond ring. It was the diamond ring everyone was always talking about, and I never understood. And it was beautiful. My heart was pounding with gladness and joy And then the moon completely covered the sun and plunged us into February darkness. And the stars were popping out brighter than I'd ever seen. And I'm a wilderness camper. It was so beautiful. And I was so glad to know who had created all of this wonder and glory. And I wanted my children to know about this beauty and this feeling. Brad and I had children, and we took them to mountains covered in snow where they could collect red dirt in little vials, and to beaches where they collected seashells, and we took them to cliffs where waterfalls were plunging down the rocks, and we took them paddling on lakes that were so clear you could see 30, 40, 50 feet deep. And we took them to see the colors dancing in the sky of Aurora Borealis. And on full moon nights, I would wake them up and read to them a full moon poem and teach them about their Heavenly Father who had designed all these things for our joy. I wanted to see it again. I wanted to see it again, the total solar eclipse. I wanted to share it with my children. And so when we learned that there was going to be a total solar eclipse in 2017, we began to plan and prepare. I booked a place for us to park our car on a big old farm field. And I booked an Airbnb for us to stay in with our kids. Vanessa flew in from Mexico, and Janelle and her husband and their two little ones came along. But the Airbnb was in Kentucky near Mammoth Cave because Janelle just was not sure that 2 minutes of darkness was worth 10 hours of driving. And so we visited Mammoth Cave, and then on the day of the eclipse, we drove the 2 hours to the farm field, and we pulled in where the farmers told us to, and all around us were people unpacking their cars, lawn chairs and coolers and music boxes, and they were setting up tailgate style. But the farmer had told us that there would be a field reserved for watching the eclipse. And so we pulled our lawn chairs and our cooler, and we walked across that hot, dusty field of the farm over to a beautifully earth-shaped, curved mound of grass underneath a big old sky. And we were hot. It was August 21st, 2017, and it was over 100 degrees. And Janelle was miserable, and she knew 2 minutes of darkness, and it was not worth all of this. So I went and bought a great big watermelon to try and cool her down, and Vanessa took the two little ones over to some shade trees, and we sat in our lawn chairs and waited, and then it was time to put on our solar glasses. And so all together, we were there, putting on our solar glasses and looking up at the sky, looking up at that golden, orange, pulsating, turmeric-colored orb in the sky. As the moon began to come across it, more and more and more covered it came until that crescent was there, and that diamond ring burst out for all of us to see, and the moon plunged us into almost darkness, not quite in August, and then another diamond ring as it moved away. And my greatest joy was not that beauty, but the beauty of Janelle turning around and looking at me with tears of joy running down her face. I could almost see her heart pounding. And she said to me, "When's the next one?" And I knew that she had been transformed into an umbrophile. And so, a year and a half before the 2024 eclipse, I booked an Airbnb in an 1850s old farmhouse almost on the center line of the eclipse. And they joined us, that family now with teenagers, and we decided to go, for the teenagers' sake, to the Shawnee National Park, to a cave where there was a music festival, bluegrass and strings, and we enjoyed the music, and the girls enjoyed the vendors and the jewelry and the shopping. And then when it was almost time, we went up to the grassy field where our car was and where we had set up a shade tent. Yes, I brought shade this time. We didn't need it in April. And we sat there in our chairs, in our lawn chairs, with our solar eclipse glasses on, and Gandalf nearby calling out to us, "Put your glasses on." And so we all did. At the same time, look up at that sky and watch that moon eclipsing that sun, that golden pulsating orb. We watched that diamond ring shine out and it go into each of our hearts at the same time. And we watched the biggest solar prominence what we'd ever seen. You can see it in the pictures. And then we watched another diamond ring as the moon started to move around. And I watched Don as he took video of 360-degree view of a sunset. And we listened as the sun moved away to the birds waking up and singing as if we were in a bird sanctuary. But more important than all of that beauty was the beauty of my family sitting here together, looking up at the same sky.
Thank you so much for that story. Thank you for drawing us in with all of that vivid imagery, word pictures, and it was just, it made us feel like we were right there with her, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did.